Welcome to the Future of Payroll and Workforce Management Insights by HR.com, your go-to resource for insights into payroll and workforce management. From navigating compliance and technology trends to exploring the latest in global payroll solutions, we're here to keep you ahead of the curve. Join us as we dive into the forces reshaping payroll and share practical strategies to optimize your workforce management. Let's get started. Well, hello everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of Future of Payroll and Workforce Management, a podcast here at HR.com. And my name is Brent Skinner, and I am the Executive Community Leader for Future of Payroll here at HR.com, where I do several other things as well. Pretty busy, but enough about me. We're going to talk to somebody who's probably even busier than I am. This is Karow. Hello, Katie.
Hello, welcome. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for agreeing to do that podcast. We have an awesome episode that we're going to have here today. We're going to be talking about, you are the statewide payroll director for state of Minnesota. And we're going to talk about, how payroll has become more strategic, maybe your journey, how you got into payroll. And we're going to talk about sort of the emergence of this idea of the Chief Payroll Officer and what's driving it. And this is going to be a particularly nice segue into the topic today, but I like to ask all of my guests at the outset of the podcast, what's your passion in the world of work? And specifically in payroll for you, what is it that gets you up and going every day, and really ripping and roaring for the world of work?
Yeah, for sure. So at the end of the day, I want to get paid, and I think everybody else wants to get paid too, right? So nobody goes to work saying, "Hey, I wanna go do my job." Well, I haven't met anybody that says I want to go do my job and not get paid. And really, when I started this career, I fell into it. I didn't know what I wanted to be when I grew up, and still kind of never figured that out. And I got thrown into this about 20 years ago when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And I got thrown into it as an account clerk for local government and was shown, "Hey, here's payroll. I need help with this." And most people that I talk to when they are in payroll always say, "I got thrown into this." They never pick the path of payroll. And it's always interesting to hear how they got thrown into it, because it's always a different story of how they got thrown into payroll. And for me, it was like, was shown, here's how to do payroll. And then I went to another company and did payroll. And then I was allowed the opportunity to be the single source of payroll specialist, and got really in depth and really into learning the ins and outs and the rules and laws. And I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. I want to know more. I want to know more. And at that time, I didn't have that piece of paper, that the degree. And I got the degree in business management. It has nothing to do with payroll.
It's just a good one. That's a good one to get.
But it was a piece of paper that said that I had, the wherewithal to actually sit down and settle and focus. And then I was able to go into a managerial position over payroll. So I was the payroll manager over a couple people. I get to learn a little bit more.
Yeah.
And then I became the payroll manager for a larger group. And then I became vice president of payroll and taxation. And now I'm the statewide payroll director. And along that entire path, it was certifications and more in-depth and more integration into the payroll world. And there is a payroll world. I have my certified payroll professional. I have my SHRM certification. I have my HRCI certification. I am the vice president of our local chapter here in Minnesota, the North Star chapter. So really got ingrained in the payroll world and found out that there's such an environment of people wanting to do what's best for the employees at the end of the day, because without employees, we don't have a business. Without a business, we don't have a job. And this movement for what we're talking about today, this chief payroll officer having a seat at that table is such an amazing movement and much needed today. So I'm really excited to be able to kind of dive into it with you.
Yeah, and it is exciting. And we weren't in a position as an industry or a profession, the payroll profession, I would say maybe 10, 15, certainly 20 years ago to even be talking about this. And there's one thing that you said that I love the way you put it, and just want because this is another theme that we've been talking about with various guests on the podcast, is this idea of nobody really, for some reason, payroll isn't necessarily a profession that typically not a profession that folks, kind of pick out, when they start college. Oh yeah, I want to be a payroll
Right.
professional, right? So many people, they kind of like just they stumble into it. But what you said, which is actually even better way of saying it, is, you got thrown into it. I think a
Uh-huh.
lot of people do get thrown into payroll. So, and it's one of those things, though, organizations often are like, oh gosh, we need somebody to fix this in payroll. You know, Katie can do this, right? And so, and
Right.
kind of get thrown into it, and then a lot of folks, they enter into this profession that way, and then they realize, oh wait, I really like payroll. I didn't
Yes.
realize there was this whole thing there. So there's that piece of it too. And I love this story, the way you told it about your journey into payroll, and you sort of a cumulative levels. You kept leveling up, new character unlocked in the
Right.
video
Yeah.
game of payroll,
The
right?
next level.
Yeah, and you know what? Actually, I didn't even realize I was doing this. The Payroll Congress last month at Payroll Org. That was the theme, was the video game theme actually, and it was a character unlocking a new character level. So, but anyway, um, how have we gotten to this point in payroll? Like, because we're at the present, we're actually having the conversation today around payroll being strategic, or payroll needs to be strategic, or organizations need to look at their payroll people as strategic, which wasn't a conversation that was necessarily happening 10 years ago, certainly not 20 years ago. And you've seen a lot of this longitudinally. Why are we here now? Like, what are the factors that have brought us to this point where we're
For
having this
sure.
conversation?
Yeah. 10 years ago, I was on a 10, 15 years ago, I was on a green screen sitting in a cube by myself in a back office. And I had my one little phone, and nobody really kind of knew what I did, where it was, all of that. And it was just kind of like, I got my paycheck where I'm happy, whatever. And now it's people are coming to me with questions about, um, how am I supposed to calculate this overtime? And there's all of these rules and questions, and every day there's a new legislative change coming down the line, whether it's at the city level, the state level, the federal government level. Um, and nobody's prepared for it. Nobody is really on top of it. And everybody is so busy with their own regular job that nobody can keep track of it and keep on top of it. And the HR director needs to be keeping track of their policies and procedures to take care of those employees, our employees, to keep them happy. And
Yeah.
our finance directors and all of the financial people need to make sure that the money's staying where it's staying. Nobody's keeping track of all of these legislation changes to make sure that whatever's happening over on these two pieces actually is in line with what's happening at the state and federal level. And because of all of those changes, um, there's realization now that the there's a need and a desire to have somebody who is that go-to person, that go-to expert who can say, I know what's in play, and I know how this is going to affect you in HR. I know how this is going to affect you in the financial level. I know how this is going to affect the entire enterprise. And we need to think about this at a strategic level. How is this new leave policy, specifically in Minnesota? We have a new one that's coming out January 1st. We've been talking about it for 8 months now, and it's a huge plan that we have to implement. And we've been working on it now all year so that it can go into effect on January 1st. And it takes the entire enterprise, but payroll's the leading cause of it, or the leading person to charge for it. And to have a person to say, this is how it's going to affect us. This is how it's going to affect the employees. HR, this is your piece of the puzzle. Financially, this is how it's going to affect you. And payroll, here are the laws that go into effect. And this is how it's going to affect the paycheck. This is how it's going to affect the employees. This is how it's going to come out of this, and this. So
Hmm.
having that key player that can really tie those pieces together to bridge that gap is necessary um, across the entire organization.
Yeah, I love what you're saying here, and it reminded me of something I heard from another guest of mine on the podcast. It's a future episode, so I won't spoil who it's going to be. But we talked about it and I don't know the actual percentage, but from what I understand is that payroll is a source of more regulatory. There's a greater regulatory framework around payroll, how people get paid, than there is around, you know, in healthcare, in some aspects of healthcare. So it's like it's highly regulated, and of the risk mitigation, which a lot of that is around compliance for an organization, a huge component of it is related to payroll
For
and
sure.
compensating the employees. One thing that you mentioned here is that you mentioned that the HR is very much focused on the people, right? And the employee experience and many other things as well. And they have their own compliance concerns also. And then you have the CFO or the finance, the accounting arm of the organization that's very much focused on where the money is going and where and how it's being used and all this kind of stuff. In payroll and the way people are and the fact that people are paid, it kind of is in how they're integral to the organization. It's the organization literally would not, it would just be a conception of the people who lead the organization, just be an idea without the people actually doing it, right? And
Right.
so there's that person. The payroll kind of sits in between. It's not
That's
quite
right.
HR and it's not quite finance. It's in between. And that's the piece of it that's really interesting because you have chief HR officers, you have chief financial officers. Why not have a chief payroll officer? It makes a lot of sense. Um, what do you have to say to that?
Why not?
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely, why not? I've worked in public, I've worked in private, I've worked in nonprofit, and nobody knows where to put payroll. And there's a reason for that. In my mind, there's a reason for that because HR deals with the people. Payroll deals with people because we pay the people. Payroll has been housed under finance because they deal with finance. Payroll deals with finance because we pay the people. We do both. And I've actually talked about this where payroll is that bridge between the finance and HR. We don't fit under either of them well. We fit under both of them, but not at a sub level. We sit at the same level as them, and we should be that bridge between them so that we can have that conversation at the same level so that we can ensure that the people and the policies and the procedures that HR is implementing fit the needs of the laws and the legislation and the regulatory components that you were alluding to match what we can do, and the union contracts, can we implement them correctly into the payroll system? On the other side are the policies and procedures that HR want to implement. How is that going to financially impact us? So that when the paycheck comes out, how is finance going to be impacted? And sometimes there's a disconnect if payroll is housed under one or the other. Finance, if we're housed under finance, we might not talk to HR and we'll hear about the policies and procedures after it's too late. Or if we're housed under HR, we don't know the impact to finance, or finance doesn't know the impact until it's too late. And then these bargaining units get this massive increase and finance hasn't budgeted for it in time. And now there's a significant impact to their budget that they weren't accounting for. Where if we're all at the same level, at the same table, having these conversations, payroll can be that intermediary having those same conversations and kind of interpreting, because they do speak a different language, where payroll, as a chief payroll officer, can interpret what HR is saying and what finance is saying, and being able to have that conversation both ways where they each understand each other and can come to that same conclusion without breaking the chain, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Yeah. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. It's there's a it's interesting that there hasn't been sort of, if you think back to, let's think about the origins of business, and that we were in a cave with cave people or whatever. Being a little bit facetious here, but it's funny that there hasn't been a leadership role associated with payroll up to this point. It's kind of interesting, right? Because
Hmm.
it's almost like a blind spot in organizations, and almost like a blind spot in organizational theory, if you think about it, right? Because you have the person that's focused on the finances, the chief financial officer, and you have a relatively newer phenomenon, the chief HR officer. But there's always been, for the longest time, HR has gone through its own transformation over the years, but
Right.
there's always been the person that's sort of been at the top of HR, and it can be a senior director, maybe even a VP level person, and that's been a thing for a long time. So there's this focus in the organization, like on the focus on the finances, the focus on the people, and almost this inadvertent um uh ignoring of the fact that there's this other piece of it where the two meet together, that it's not to repeat ourselves here, but that payroll is both of those things at the same time, and that's
Hmm.
really, really important. I, let's shift. Let's shift just a
Yeah.
little bit here, because we've talked about the regulatory framework, and I know we've spoken in the green room before around, how we have a green room here, even though we're not a late
Yes.
night talk show, but we have a green room on
The
this
virtual green room.
podcast. That's right. That's right. Um, um, we talked about how the regulatory complexity um, it's always been high, but it increased by several orders of magnitude with in the wake of the pandemic, with reciprocity rules and people working from home, and what does
Hmm.
it mean? What tax domain applies to ABC person versus LMNOP person, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, and so there's been all that, but technology also. How has technology helped bring us to this point as well, where we can talk about, because now that payroll is actually equipped and is poised, positioned, and also equipped in certain ways, and I think on the equipped side we have the technology piece of it to actually step into this role that is now possible to exist.
I can now strategically think about I'm a statewide payroll director for the state of Minnesota. I still have employees across the country. I still have to think about how I'm connecting with and paying those employees in another state. How am I taxing those employees in another state? How am I incorporating all of the rules and legislation and all of that? But I can strategically think about my teams and bringing expertise from around the country onto my team now. And what does that mean to integrate them into other teams and bringing them better and collaborating better with my counterparts?
Mhm. And the technology piece of it, there's much better automation, and there's so much tedium in payroll processing if you absent technology, right?
So much.
And
I went from a green screen to now I'm in the cloud. Yes.
exactly. How is that? How has that had an impact as well?
Um, it has freed up my mental capacity. It has freed up my time to really think about what I can do better, differently. I've labeled it actually the lazy man's way. And I love it because if you really think about it, the lazy person is going to find the fastest, easiest way to do something so that they don't have to work hard. And I love that mentality because they're going to find the easiest way to get the task done, but they're going to do it well. At least that's how my lazy person works. Is they're going to is they're going to find the easiest, fastest way to get the job done and get the job done well, so that they can free up their time to do other things. So the manual reports that we were doing 10, 15 years ago of balancing out all of these taxes, all of these vacation accruals, all of these time off requests, whatever it might be that we were doing manually 10, 15 years ago, even 5 years ago. What can we do today to make it easier? I'm going to implement my lazy man thought to automate that so that it frees me up to strategically think about what I can do differently for my employees and for my counterparts in HR, in finance, in XYZ department, so that I can support them better to help them do their job better at the end of the day, whether it's entering their timesheets easier or submitting their timesheets better and faster so that I'm not calling them on timesheet day. Hey, where's your timesheet? How come you didn't submit it and approve it? Whatever it might be. How would a lazy person do this better, faster? I want to do that so that it frees me up. And technology has helped me so much with that, that I'm excited for the next phase and I want to be able to continue doing that. And a chief payroll officer will be able to do that if they can collaborate at that higher level.
Yeah, yeah. Yes. You make me think of a term, payroll daydreaming, right? If
Yes.
you right, you have time to actually look out the window and imagine what a better payroll scenario world is, right? And
Yes.
and that technology is freeing up that time. We've heard the term work smarter, faster, but I like the lazy man analogy there, or term as well. It kind of, yeah, some lazy person at some point said, "We'll call us working smarter and faster," but
Right. Yeah.
but
I
but
call it
that's
for
not
what
the
it
same.
is.
Yeah, and of course you're providing value to the organization. Um, this has been a fantastic, just really fascinating conversation. Thank you so much
Yeah. Thank you
for
for
bringing
having
that.
me.
Oh yeah, absolutely, and we'll have to have you back.
Anytime. Anytime.
Thanks for tuning in to the Future of Workforce Management and Payroll Insights by HR.com. We hope today's episode brought you valuable insights and fresh perspectives on the future of payroll and workforce management. Be sure to check out more episodes and explore resources at HR.com/podcast or wherever you listen to podcasts. Until next time, keep innovating and making a difference in the world of payroll and workforce management.